session, we have three representatives of the European Commission. First of all, we will have Piers O'Donoghue, Director for the Future Networks Directorate at DG Connect in European Commission. Then we have Pierre Chastanet, Head of Cloud and Software Unit at the European Commission. And finally, Max Lemke, Head of Internet of Things Unit at the European Commission, that will also give us a little bit more of an overview on the choreography of this event. So now I'm glad to pass the floor to Piers, and I will stop sharing my screen. Piers, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Monique, and good morning to everybody. It's great for me to be with you, as this is a very important day for us in the European Commission. And I'd just like to reflect as we start the discussions about, for example, what we've all learned, what we think we all know now about COVID-19, the way that it has heightened reliance on digital technologies for day-to-day activities, but also for economic and social resilience. And now the next challenge is to enhance the take-up of those technologies, because they're essential for our economic recovery, for productivity, for innovation, and for driving efficiency and modernization across all sectors of the economy. So to do that, European industry needs to grasp the potential of the computing continuum. So what we are discussing today is actually at the heart of Europe's recovery and Europe's future. And that is not hyperbole. That is not just words. As we will see today, it has some very practical implications. But to help chart that future, the Commission has set out a roadmap called the Digital Decade Communication. It was published in March and has now been already followed up in order to address the twin digital and green transitions, which are the priority of this European Commission. The digital communication, the digital compass, as we call it, sets the course towards a digitally empowered Europe by 2030, building on secure and sustainable digital infrastructures. Now, that translates ambitions and, shall I say, the sort of those words that I have mentioned into practical goals, together with a governance framework, and they are currently being discussed by the Council and the Parliament. But we here do need to fill in the detail on how the goals will be achieved in practice, as it is a very goal-oriented and pragmatic strategy. We need, as part of Europe's digital future, skilled support from ICT professionals. We need new technologies such as 5G and microprocessors. And we need a resilient cloud edge infrastructure. And that's reflected, for example, in the target of 10,000 climate neutral, highly secure edge nodes that should be deployed across the European Union, which is one of the concrete and practical targets that is set in the digital compass. One of the other key challenges for Europe is our dependency on third country suppliers for some of these strategic technologies. And that could even increase as the pace of innovation accelerates unless we get our act together. So the European industrial strategy is focused on connectivity, on microprocessors, and on data technologies, which I'll come back to. But the most important thing is to understand how to best use and reuse data. And just to reflect that the use of open source in these technologies, hardware and software, will also reduce our dependency, and it will strengthen digital autonomy, because both open source software and open hardware permit competition, and they actually lower the threshold for innovation. And as an added benefit, of course, citizens in Europe can get real innovation and more quickly. But as I've said, our primary focus has to be on data. So even as we work here together to deliver the next generation technologies and infrastructures that generate, process, store, and transport the data, we really have to think about how that data is then maximized and exploited for the benefit of the economy. We know that there's an exponential increase in data generation and data processing, and the Internet of Things is growing very fast. It's predicted that it will be at a 1.3 trillion euro market by 2026. And of course, edge computing is the next logical step. And that was why in early 2020, the Commission issued the European Data Strategy, which was aiming to secure and to enable secure storage and processing capacities for Europe. for European data spaces and for artificial intelligence, which is another strand of our digital strategy. Now, that altogether, naturally, it puts an emphasis on the growing amount of data generated by IoT, as I've said, by other peripheral equipment, and by computers in all sectors of the economy in many different areas. We will focus today on agriculture, on logistics and transport, but there are many other examples. And with a move towards decentralized data processing, which is closer to the edge, innovation will also increasingly be taking place closer to the edge. And the greater ability to collect and analyze data close to where the activity is can be used to make processes more trusted and efficient, and also, of course, more effective and efficient from an environmental standpoint, if we do it right. So these are all issues which must be in our minds as we discuss the next stages of our work program and funding programs. And then, as part of the European data strategy, the Commission announced ambitious investments in cloud, in edge, and in data technologies. Logically, as I've said, because it is at the core of our recovery and our future. What we envision is a federated cloud continuum that will need to address issues such as privacy and security, energy efficiency, portability, standards, and contract conditions, all of which can also mark the European approach to these technologies and services as different to some other areas of the world, where Europe actually insists on a higher standard of protection, of business ethic, and of energy efficiency across all sectors, and where anybody who wishes to play in this space in Europe must respect those rules and conditions. Because our concern at the moment is that a few non-European companies currently dominate the market. They take up to 80% of revenue. But of course, the market is changing with the transition to distributed intelligence, Swarm, which will also be a feature of the cloud edge IoT continuum. This all gives an opportunity to Europe to get back in the lead. So we're not aiming to compete with the hyperscalers on their current business models, on the current markets, but really to get a head start for Europe with the next generation cloud edge IoT technologies. In this, business-to-business platforms are very, very important. They're very important for industry. And Europe already takes a key role in several of those sectors. But of course, we have to have investment at a European scale. We can't allow it to be fragmented among member states. We have to harness the best technical expertise at European level and centralize efforts while working, of course, with regional initiatives to create this cloud edge continuum. Now, there are, of course, therefore, a number of strands and policies. It is our job in the Commission to streamline and make that as simple as possible for the actors, but also to ensure that the investment opportunities are coordinated and coherent, and that they do build up to a common and coherent industrial vision. For that, we need to work closely with industry, and that's why we've launched 2 European alliances, one on industrial data, edge and cloud, and another on processes and semiconductor technologies. And that means that we can have the direct input and involvement of European companies to help us to design and manage these funding programs as they support the European tech sector in this very ambitious objective. So a competitive European cloud edge and cloud offering that can scale globally really does need to be developed. And that's why we have to bring all of the actors together. We also have to be able to process highly sensitive data. And that is an area where European governments will be very anxious and keen to have European suppliers able to provide to them a full value chain of secure, innovative next generation cloud and edge technologies. So the European Cloud Alliance should really gather the broader ecosystem and interested organizations in order to do that work with us. We won't work in silos. We won't duplicate work. And there are important private initiatives such as Gaia X, jointly initiated by France and Germany, which is already growing and showing its usefulness in this ecosystem as well, and we will work closely with them. But for us to take full control, it's essential that we all work together to set standards and technology references. And that's so much important also in the current research calls and in the future work program. in order to work together with the Alliance, with industry, and with member states. We've also laid down the foundations for an important project of common European interest in the area of next generation cloud and edge. That's an ambitious, future-looking investment tool that was set out in the industrial technology roadmap in order to allow the development of application services powered by cloud and edge that will actually provide significant value to Europe. But it does require extensive investment in R&D and engineering, and that's why we have to bring what are relatively small European players compared to some of the global competitors together to work on this IPCEI. Its objective will be to develop and roll out the next generation of cloud and edge federated capabilities, and we expect it to respond to users' expectations in terms of real-time, low latency, privacy, generating and interoperable services and technologies, while of course respecting our Green Deal objectives. That's very important across a number of sectors, some of which I've mentioned, but you can imagine in the sectors of most interest to yourself how this will actually play a role. Now, this is all very urgent. We have to take this opportunity now, and this is why the discussions today are so important, so that Europe can be actually in the driver's seat on the edge, cloud, and swarm computing race. So today's workshop aims at getting your input. Max and Pierre will explain that in more detail to you. We need to identify the research and innovation challenges and then sort of set out the actions to support this cloud to edge transition. What we have really in mind is investigating the needs and setting concrete targets. I want to stress that both in our policy initiatives and in our research and deployment funding initiatives, we are determined to be real, to be practical, and to be focused on delivery, which we can only do, of course, with all of the actors in the ecosystem, including in particular industry, government, and the research institutes. Obviously, we have other programs supporting that, such as the Digital Europe program, which is focusing on large-scale deployment. So I'm going to stop there. I'm going to give the floor to my colleagues Pierre and Max, as Monique has said, and I hope that all of you can participate actively, but also that you benefit from the workshop today, so that we have fruitful discussions and insightful takeaways for the day ahead. So thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to a great day's discussions.
Thank you very much, Piers. Now we give the floor to Pierre Chastanet, that is Head of Cloud and Software Unit. Pierre, the floor is yours. We can see your slides.
Okay, that's great. I will try to bring them full screen. If does that work?
Perfect, and we can hear
excellent. Well. Okay, perfect. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and many thanks for this great opportunity of this workshop to discuss the upcoming investment and policies that we're developing in the space of next generation cloud to edge to IoT. And I hope that through our different presentations, you will understand how we are articulating the different elements of those policies and investments. Maybe just a few words of context to start with. Data economy is developing at an incredible pace. The amount of data generated in the EU is going to be multiplied by a factor 6 between now and the middle of the decade. And the way those data will be collected, generated, but also processed is changing fundamentally. Digital transformation of all sectors of the economy is a major driver of this deluge of data, but the way the data are going to be processed is going to change. Currently, most of data are processed in centralized computing capacity, data centers of enterprises, public administration, or public and private cloud. We see increasing demand from users across all sectors, public and private, to have data processed closer to where they are being generated. So this is what is called edge computing, edge technologies, and respond to an appetite from users to have more control over their data. It's part of our policies to encourage data access, data sharing, data reuse, but this will only happen if users have adequate reassurance on the degree of control that they have over their data. We should also not shy away in Europe. Very often people perceive that global hyperscalers are dominating this field. That's actually not true when you start looking into more precisely the market segment. It's true that on the data infrastructure side, we have probably lost the battle on this, but Europe is extremely competitive on software as a service technology. We have plethora of technology that are tailored to specific sectoral needs. We are also very good at industrial data processing, and this is where a lot of the data will be generated in the near future. So we have to capitalize on those strengths to develop the next generation of data processing technologies that is demanded by the European public and private sector. All I have explained is really at the heart of the European data strategy. And we have been articulating this data strategy around two key aspects that are fully complementary, and I will come to this in the next slide. But basically, we are trying to do a coordinated effort to develop on one end the next generation of data processing capacities in Europe, and at the same time develop pools of data at European level that will serve the specific needs of individual sectors of the European economy. These are the so-called common European data spaces. Having these two components, data processing capacities and common European data spaces, are essential to develop artificial intelligence in Europe. We want to be able to do European AI with European data in order to provide sufficient guarantee, sufficient reassurance to users across sectors that when AI is operating, it will respond to certain risk assessment, ethics, and other criteria that are being developed separately. So this is these two pillars really drive our work. So on one end, we are trying to mobilize all actors of the European industry and the member state through the European Alliance, for Industrial Data, Edge and Cloud, as Piers mentioned, in order to coordinate the effort, especially on sectors that are dealing with very sensitive data. So in the public sector, in aeronautics, security, defense, for instance. The European Alliance will also serve as a coordination mechanism with other existing initiatives, notably those driven by the member state, such as Gaia-X. In parallel with this, we also want to invest in the next generation of data processing technologies. You will see in a minute how we want to invest in the deployment of technologies, cloud, edge, IoT technologies that are available now, but we also need to look at the next generation. This will be a key focus of today's workshop. Horizon Europe is a key instrument for that purpose, and the IPCI on Next Generation Cloud is another major instrument for that purpose. Let me go a bit more in detail, as I promised, on the articulation between the development of a European federation of data processing technologies and the different common European data spaces. So basically one fuels the other. It's really a virtuous cycle that we're trying to create between the two. So the idea of the European Cloud Federation is to interconnect at infrastructure and service level all the capacities that are scattered across Europe. We don't want to replicate the model of the hyperscaler. We know that data processing capacities are extremely distributed across the EU. We don't want to start centralizing all those capacity. On the contrary, we want to capitalize on the fact that there are data processing capacity, data centers, edge nodes, cloud data center that are spread across the EU. And we want to use the investment at our disposal to interconnect these different capacities and put an abstraction layer on top of it that will enable any sector to access seamlessly all those data processing capacity, ranging from very centralized high-performance computing down to super distributed edge infrastructure and services. It will also offer through marketplace, for instance, various data services, data analytics, blockchain services, artificial intelligence on demand, so that it's not only generic data processing capacity, but also added value services that we want to deploy or that for which we want to facilitate the deployment in specific sectors. On the data sector side, I really encourage you to look at the DEP program, the Digital Europe work program that was just published, adopted by the Commission yesterday, and that will detail the prioritization of the individual sector in which we're going to invest in 21-22. So we have picked a number of those sectors to kick off the development of European data spaces in those specific sectors. Maybe one important mention here, when we talk about European data spaces, sometimes people have the misperception that we're talking about a big central database sitting somewhere in Brussels or in Luxembourg. That's absolutely not the case. Those data spaces will capitalize on the distributed architecture of the underlying data infrastructure. So when we take, for instance, a health data space, basically it will be an interconnection of various databases that are scattered across the EU, but will allow a seamless access to those health data, regardless of where they are being stored and processed. So that's a very important notion when we talk about common data space. We will mobilize all the investment that are at the disposal of the European Commission in the new multi-annual financial framework. That means the different European programs with a digital component, that's Horizon Europe, CEF2, and DEP. I will come back to this in the next slide. It also includes member state investment, notably through the Resilience and Recovery Facility. The member states have included a significant portion of investment in their national plans. We have very well exceeded the 20% target of investment in digital through the RF that was set by the President of the Commission. And a very good portion of this is going to go into cloud and data processing technologies. And finally, we count on industry to co-invest. It can't just be the public sector. We need to have co-investment with industry, where need be supported by private investor, which is the purpose of the InvestEU program. In total, when we sum up all these investments, we do expect that in the next MFF, there will be over 10 billion euros that will be invested in cloud to edge, to IoT and data technologies at large. If you recall, for those of you that have worked in Horizon 2020, we were very often facing what was called the Valley of Death. People were undertaking very good research and innovation projects, but then at the end, despite extremely good research results, those results were very often sitting on a shelf or in the brains of brilliant European scientists. And there was really lack of instrument to be able to take those great results and bring them to the European market. The Commission has really reflected on this and has developed a number of instruments to be able to facilitate the deployment of technologies, of digital technologies, infrastructure and services in a cross-border manner across the EU. So we will continue research and innovation through Horizon Europe, notably on the next generation of cloud to edge to IoT. We will detail this in the course of the day, and Max in particular will give you more insight into this in a few minutes. But we will also start deploying cross-border data infrastructure and cross-border data services. Connecting Europe Facility 2 will focus on those physical interconnection of scattered cloud and edge infrastructure, whereas the Digital Europe program will look at the added value services, notably those middleware layer of interoperability that enable to interconnect different heterogeneous data services, do data aggregation, data anonymization, federate the cloud-to-edge services, and offers this seamlessly to any common European data space. So DEP will be able to foster this middle layer that can be reused for all the data spaces. And of course, it will invest into the development of those individual sectoral data spaces that I mentioned earlier. Then, as I mentioned, this will be complemented by the RF, InvestEU, and the IPCI on next generation cloud to edge infrastructure and services. So if I pick up on the first point of the previous slide when I was talking about the valley of deaths, but at the same time the fact that now there are instruments at our disposal to deploy technology, we're really encouraging you to have a look back at the research result of the Horizon 2020 project portfolio. So a really great outcome in many of those projects. Well, maybe there are very good components that can be reused and be brought at European scale, thanks to the SAFE2 and Digital Europe programs. So please do look back at those projects. There is certainly golden nuggets that can be exploited and brought to European scale. I won't go into this. Max will detail this in a minute. In the cloud sphere, you will hear in the course of the day the work that we're proposing in Horizon Europe in the first work program on cognitive cloud and open source for cloud. My colleagues Luis and Maria will detail this, and the call will open very shortly. So you will hear more detail about this in the upcoming session. Maybe just a last word about the upstream work we are doing to engineer the future work program for Horizon Europe, but also for the other digital program that I mentioned. And I will mention two key things that are essential for us to drive the work forward. One is the future cloud cluster. This is the coordination mechanism to coordinate among the different Horizon projects, and that has enabled to work on a number of aggregated view on key topics in cloud to edge area. One is the development of a future research roadmap, so to guide the Commission on what is the need in terms of research and innovation in cloud technologies. And secondly, to guide research, but also deployment on the basis of a common reference architecture. This is absolutely essential. We cannot federate European capacities if we do not work on the basis of a common architecture. The other major element that is helping us to guide our work is the strategic technology roadmap that has been developed by a group of Sherpa coming from companies that were called for by Commissioner Breton, so CEOs that were gathered around a round table and that were tasked by Commissioner Breton to develop such a strategic roadmap for cloud and edge technologies in Europe. The CEO roundtable handed over to Commissioner Breton the fruit of their work in May this year. This is all publicly available. You can, I really encourage you, and you will see in the slide there is extensive reference to this roadmap. And this is really helping us to understand what are the priorities of industry and where we need to continue investing, both in the upstream research and innovation, but also downstream in the deployment and cross-border deployment of those key data processing technologies. I will stop here. I thank you very much for your attention, and I'm really wishing you all a very productive workshop. This is really very important for us to guide our future investment. Many thanks.
Thank you, Pierre. We're running a little bit late, so I jump to the next on the next talk. We will have now Max Lemke, the head of unit of Internet of Things unit, that takes the floor. Max, the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Monique. Can you hear me? Can you just confirm?
Yes, we can hear you and we can
Okay.
see your screen perfectly. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So first of all, thanks to many of you for being here on a public holiday, because in many countries in Europe today is Armistice, and that's a public holiday, memorizing the end of the First World War. So thanks for being here nevertheless. What I would like to do now is from these strategic presentations on what Europe is planning, I would like to boil it down to what we do in Horizon Europe. As the unit responsible for coordinating what we do under the Cloud to Edge to IoT topic, under Horizon Europe, I would like to tell you exactly what we expect from you today, and what we offer to you today. As you know, the cloud, the cloud data strategy is implemented through different EU mechanisms, and Pierre has given you that exact overview. Now we come to what we do in Horizon Europe. So now the focus is on the topic Cloud to Edge to IoT for European data. And that's one topic in the program, but it's very closely linked to many other topics, like the topics on data, the topics on AI, and also to what is done in the joint undertakings, key digital technologies. For example, on cyber physical systems, I see that the cyber physical systems and the IoT world are somewhat converging. And when the IoT gets real time, what's the difference to cyber physical systems? And also the SNS, Smart Networks and Services, 5G is the major enabler. And last not least, I would also want to mention here already the CHIPS Act that has recently been announced by President von der Leyen. And there it's also to see to what extent on chips will Europe invest in chips, semiconductors, also for cloud servers, for example, or for the Internet of Things, like let's say the processors in the car of the future. So what we do here is we have a twofold objective in this meeting for the topic Cloud to Edge to IoT for European data. In the morning, we reflect on the topics that are open at the moment, and that will close soon. So that will close in April. So we have about 4 months to go on those topics. This is not an info day. They are not yet open. They will open this month still. So we see this more as a discussion, as a stimulation. We are not discussing proposal building and things like that. So I would like all the speakers to refrain from building proposals in this meeting, as it is not an info day. Second, in the afternoon, we will look into the future. You know, the Commission always works a bit ahead of time. You know, we have to already, now that we have just started evaluating the first proposals from the first work program. We already have to look at the second one, 23, 24. So that is what we are doing here now in the afternoon. We want your recommendation on what we should do in 23, 24 on Cloud to Edge to IoT for European data. And as we need this input already very, very early next year and need to consolidate that, we have decided to put down some ideas that we have. So that we don't want to preempt you recommending to do us what we should do, but we have already taken the recommendations, and I come to that in a second, of what is available. So just to summarize again what my colleagues have said before, we are really looking at a paradigm shift here, cloud edge to IoT. We see that more and more data is processed where it is where it's collected, so at the edge. So whereas at the moment a lot of discussion is on cloud, HPC on the one hand, and edge cloud, we extend this compute continuum to including the IoT devices at the edge, and that means it goes beyond cloud edge service provisioning. It incorporates the power of the IoT and brings the power to where the computing power to where the data is. And that opens to new concepts like artificial intelligence at the edge or decentralized intelligence. And that also enables a compute continuum with the IoT being part of it, and in the long term enabling real-time processing, for example. And that's a particular European strengths that we have on this highly distributed way of doing things in a very highly distributed fashion, because that is the differentiator between what we are strong at and what the directions the hyperscalers, for example, come from. And when you look at cloud computing, you also see that cloud computing is largely general purpose and often application agnostic, or largely application agnostic. And edge, and in particular far edge computing, must be strongly customized towards the application, because also some of the devices are owned by the application owner and not by the service provider. So that's a new opportunity for Europe, because we are strong in that. So the next generation of IoT and edge computing, and also the next generation of industrial platforms and ecosystems. So far we have supported that in 21-22 with 170 million euros, and we envisage continuation of that in the next in the next program 23-24. So when I look at what are we building our program, our proposal on, we first build on the European Industrial Technology Roadmap for the next generation cloud edge offerings. That is the one that Pierre also referred to. That was submitted to us by 27 CEOs in May this year. It says technical priorities for investment needed on a European level. It goes much beyond just Horizon Europe, includes Digital Europe, but also includes investments in industry, in member states, or through the Recovery and Resilience Package. The other report we have, high-level report, is the Next Generation IoT and Edge Computing Strategy Forum. In that report, we had 100 high-level experts to look at where we should go on, in particular on the next generation IoT and its link to the edge. It builds on a smaller report of 11 high-level experts and basically substantiated that. And that has already led to the first part in 21-22, but is already showing the way also what we have to do with the results that come out of the current research, meaning piloting those results in order to make sure that they become ready for deployment. We also have the SRAs, the strategic research agendas of NESI, IoT, HighPeak, European component, electronic components and systems, and the visions, obviously, of the members and all the partners of the Data Spaces Business Alliance that was recently founded. All of them are represented today. So when I look at the European Industrial Technology Roadmap for the next generation of cloud edge offerings, there are 3 priority areas, and I would say the first one is the one that recommends what we do on R&I largely. There's more in the others, but this is the core of it. So the recommendation is really becoming the leader in domains that will shape European cloud and edge offerings on the global market, focusing on, and now comes what is important, and you will see it in my recommendation later on: climate neutrality, cybersecurity, trustworthy data exchange, and interoperability. So you will see that in what we came up with as a potential topic for 23-24 that we would like you to reflect on. On the strategy forum, we have a speaker today who will tell us more about that. I would say it's important to look at the continuum and not just at the IoT and the cloud or the edge, but it's becoming a continuum. We see that we have to partner. None of us can do it alone. We are much too small. So we need multi-vendor partnerships. We need our organizations to work together in alliances. We need system integration platforms. We need reference architectures. I fully buy into what Pierre has said. So it's a must for there's a must for interoperability and open standards. And we must also try to avoid fragmentation and compete with each other too much. We have to join forces in open environments so that we don't get in conflict with competition laws in Europe. But open environments, I think, is the solution for it, because everybody can participate. And we should also profit from new concepts like decentralized and swarm intelligence processing, where the data is located and taking into account security, privacy, energy footprint, and so on. The group has recommended clearly that we A lot of these developments can be done in a horizontal way, but we need to get closer into applications. So we need piloting of them in and across verticals. And that's the basis for the timeline of what we do. We have at the moment in work program 21-22, we do the horizontal development. In the future, in 23-24, we go more towards piloting, maturing those technologies to prepare the deployment. So when I look at this work program, we have closed 2 topics already, and we have 3 topics open. And we will have in parallel session 1 today, we will discuss the topic on a cognitive cloud framework, on AI-enabled computing continuum from cloud to edge. So that's session 1, parallel session 1. We will talk in parallel session 2 about open source for cloud-based services. So all the discussions there will take place in session 2. And in parallel session 3, we will talk about environments and tools for decentralized intelligence at the edge. So all the topics that are opening just now in November this year, we will discuss in parallel in the morning sessions, and the calls for those close on the 5th of April. So it's important for you, if you want to engage, these are the places where you should discuss and see what are the trends that we see in these sectors. We have some very high-level speakers on that who can give you a good overview of what the issues are that are on the table. Here altogether, we have spent 169 million euros on these two. We are spending 169 million euros on these topics in this work program. Now, my final slide. Now, how do we go to the future? So I have tried to put that on one slide in order to show you where we are going. And on the bottom part, on the big blue and red boxes on the bottom part, we would like to receive your feedback. We would like to see how we can incorporate your input. We have on purpose not published this before or given it to any of the speakers. So we would like this to come up in the afternoon discussion, because this is the afternoon session that we are looking at. And we have started the process for work program 23-24 and need to get your feedback. Be open. You can tell us what you have put here is stupid. We are open to hear that from you, but we also think we cannot progress with this until early next year if we do not put anything on the table coming out of your recommendations that you have already given to us. So we need to identify priorities and what is missing in this workshop. So what we foresee is basically 3 directions. We think that we have to take the open source for cloud-based services a bit further into open source for cloud edge digital autonomy and look at open architecture, complement on software level what is done on the EU semiconductor side, like for example in the European Processor Initiative, or maybe even what comes out of what will be done under the CHIPS Act in future. We need to enable EU hardware for cloud edge data center use. So hardware doesn't work without software. So it doesn't stop at the semiconductor side. And that we see only possible if we stimulate the open source communities to increase our strategic autonomy. Second, and now I move to the right-hand side, we want to take the cognitive cloud, what we are currently addressing, one step further into a topic which I would call intelligence and automation. I didn't want to put artificial intelligence because it's more than that, for more efficient data processing in the compute continuum. And we have in particular have in mind 4 areas, which may not be sufficient, but you have to tell us, 4 areas where we need to have more intelligence, more automation to make the compute continuum happen. First, that's overall the management of the compute continuum, what is done where. Second, we need end-to-end security for data processing, in particular when data is processed on machines of different owners. We need to have, like end-to-end security, we need to have kind of end-to-end identity management across the continuum. You may not have the same identity on each of the processors that you work on. And last not least, we want to optimize in a green way the data processing across the continuum. So for example, some data we may not want to send because it's better, greener, if we process it in the nodes, in the leaves of the Internet of Things. And we only communicate the results. So we save on communication by processing directly in the leaves. I could continue talking about that forever, but let me come to the last one. In the first two calls that we are having, we already see that there are things coming out. We see that already from the proposals. There will be things coming out in the next 2 years. So it's time to bring them further. We cannot lose time. Competition is not sleeping. So we have directly to go into piloting the emerging smart IoT platforms and decentralized intelligence technologies, mature them, customize them, validate reference architectures, Pierre has mentioned that, and open platforms in an application context. You cannot see them generically. We have to go into application context. We need innovation scenarios of ubiquitous data and computation in the compute continuum. And we need consensus and ecosystem building. And that's very important to do that within verticals, but then look across the verticals, because we have to do as much as we can on a horizontal level, because we will not have the resources to repeat everything in the verticals. So it's very important to look at this matrix, verticals and horizontals. And we need to bridge between research and adoption. So what we have consolidated here comes out of your recommendation on the industrial technology roadmap and from the strategy forum. And we have tried to put that together into 3 blocks of top 3 topics that we would think should be addressed in the next work program. And in particular on these, we would definitely like to have your feedback, your backing, your comments, so we can take that forward in the next program. As I said, this is the discussion in the 2 hours this afternoon. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Max.